Everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. Come and eat. Listen diligently to me, and eat what is good, and let your... Everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. Come and eat. Listen diligently to me.
I get a lot of strength, and I'm sure you do too, from reading the scriptures. And if children, you need to be quiet, please. This is quiet time now. So anyway, the scriptures, this Bible is a book of life. And we learn one thing, that even though the costumes and the venues have changed and the actors have changed, human nature has not changed. The laws of Jehovah Elohim have not changed. The laws of cause and effect have not changed. And this book got a little bit of everything in it. It's got the good, the bad, and the ugly. It does not paint a veneer or a shellac over anything. It just lays out the facts and the truth the way it is. So that's why you see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And you see the mistakes that people have made. You see the good things they've done. And you see the consequences of the good and the bad. And we can learn from that. And it's written over a period of about, 1,500 years, or actually almost 2,000 years. Well, actually, if you go back to the beginning, over about 4,000 years from the very beginning. But it was written, if Moses wrote the earliest books up until the time of the apostles, we're looking at about 2,000 years that it was written over. It covers about 4,000 years of history. And so, as the philosopher said, the historian, I think it was Santayana, whoever he was some historian or philosopher that lived in the 1800s. He said, if you don't learn the lessons of history, you'll be condemned to repeating the mistakes of history. And I feel bad for our children in the schools. When I was going through grade school in the 60s, they were just starting to replace history with social studies, and has not benefited us. Social studies teaches you how to be a good little New World Order worker bee and fit in with the New World Order scheme of things, so they can the moneyed elites can make money off of you, and you can just be a cog in a wheel. And they do not teach you how to critically think. Thankfully, when I was in grade school, I read every history book on the shelf. Every biography, there was a whole list, several hundred or 100 or two of all the great men and women that have lived. And I read every single one of them because I was fascinated by history. And unfortunately, most of our kids don't know history. Therefore, they're not able to critically think, and they don't know the mistakes of the past, and they're not inspired by the good examples of the past. And so they've just learned to follow whatever they learn, whatever they're indoctrinated in our public indoctrination centers called public schools. And that's why most of them don't know the history, and they don't know how things used to be, so they don't have anything to compare it against. And most of them don't respect their parents or their grandparents, and they're not interested in learning about how it used to be, and because they think they know everything. The wise children will sit at the feet of the elders and their fathers and learn. I did that when I was a kid. I found it more interesting when I was in grade school and in junior high and in high school. I found it more interesting to sit at the feet of the older people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s than I did to hang out with my stupid peers. Okay, honestly, I did. I hung out with people that lived in the 1800s. I hung out with people who lived in the early 1900s, who fought in World War I picked their brains. People that grew up before the automobile was prevalent. In the horse and buggy days, I picked their brains. I'm thankful I did. People that were my grandparents that were born before the automobile, before the airplane was invented. I used to sit and listen to them. That generation is long gone. I'm thankful I did. I learned about what it was like to live in the Wild West and fight in World War I and World War II and in the Great Depression and all of these things. What, like the first automobile that came out and what it was like and all these things. I wish I could ask them more questions, but I listened to their stories. Well, the Bible is a book of life, and we need to listen and look at the stories of the ancients, and we can learn a lot. So I want to talk about Abraham here a little bit. If we go back, Abraham's an amazing man. And I just want to hit a few high points here about Abraham. First of all, there's a few things, we read this every year, hopefully we do. If we go back to Genesis 14, verse 14. Genesis 14, verse 14. And we see that Abraham had an army of 318 men. What's this dude that's got his own personal army? These were his own servants that were trained in his own house. And there was a war going on. There were 5 kings that of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and maybe Zoar. I don't know all, but those were the cities that lived in the Jordan Valley there, in the area, the northern area of the Dead Sea. And these 6 kings from Mesopotamia, from Babylon, and some think that Nimrod might have been one of these, Sherodalama or whatever you pronounce his name. That might be a name for Nimrod. We don't know. That's maybe Jewish folklore. But these 6 kings from Mesopotamia, that's the cradle of civilization. I mean, that was ancient Babylon. The Babylonian Empire came over and defeated these wealthy kings down in Sodom and in that area, and they took them prisoner, including Lot, and they took all their booty, and these were wealthy towns. Abraham's living down a little south of there in the Negev area. He's out of the line of fire, and he says, what's going? You're not going to take my kin. And Abraham's like 100 years old. I don't know if he was leading the army or not. Maybe he wasn't, but he takes, or maybe he's not quite 100. Anyway, he's getting up there in age. And they go from Beersheba about 100 miles north to Dan. That's northern Israel. I've been there. It's well over 100 miles. Chasing these kings all the way to Damascus, which is another 100 miles to the north and the east, roughly. I don't know, it's kind of north and east. And Damascus, as a crow flies, is about 138 miles from Jerusalem. Not that far. He chases. It doesn't say he defeated the kings of these 6 kings, but he captures. He does this commando thing. He splits his force. Children, you need to be quiet. I'm not going to ask you again. I'm going to need to ask you to leave and go to the other room. Okay? If you want to talk, it's whisper voices, but not full voices. You understand? And I don't want a lot of whispering going. You could actually learn from this. Okay? All right. So you might want to listen. You never know. You might learn something, and it might be a blessing to you. All right. So anyway, Abraham does a tactical maneuver, a commando thing, and he captures he attacks the part of this army, this group of people, or these armies from the east that have taken Lot and all the other people from that area captive. He sets them free, gets all the booty back that the Babylonian kings took, and he chases them all the way to Damascus, and then he makes this journey. We're talking about around 400 miles round trip by foot. And these kings, that they didn't even come and try to attack Abraham to get their stuff back. They leave him alone. This guy with 318 men. What is going on here? They probably had thousands of soldiers. Who knows? It doesn't say. But there were 6 kings from Mesopotamia. That's the area between the Tigris and Euphrates River. That was like between that and Egypt, that was the power center of the ancient world. And then we see in Genesis 23 verse 6, which is this week's parashah, and Abraham is talking to the sons of Heth. And that's where he wants to buy the cave at Machpelah, because Sarah has just died, and he wants to buy that cave. We'll talk about that in a minute. And they call him, the sons of Heth call him and say, "You are a mighty prince." Mighty. The word mighty there is Elohah or Elohim or whatever. It's a cognate of Elohim. It means powerful, mighty, mighty one. And the word prince is Nasi, Nasiy. It means a leader, a chieftain, the head. So he had 318 men. If each of those men was married and had 2 children, that's over 1,200 people in the families of his personal army alone, and that doesn't include all the other servants, older people. And they might have had more than 2 children. So there were probably several thousand people in Abraham's. Basically, Abraham was a Bedouin chieftain, and he had an entourage of several thousand people around him, and he was very wealthy. He was willing to pay 400 shekels of silver, full price. In fact, the commentators tell us it was an inflated price. But in the land that Yah said, "I'm giving it to you." Abraham was honorable, and he said, "Listen, this is really my land. Take a hike, guys. I want that cave." And he defeated the kings of Babylon. He could have probably taken it, because he was a mighty warlord. But he was honorable. We'll get to that in a minute. He was honorable with the people around him. He did not treat them like scumbag, and the money and the power that he had did not go to his head. Normally, when people have money and power, which Abraham did, and he had the respect of the Canaanites, usually goes to their head, and they start to use it for their own benefit, to feather their own nest. Not Abraham. Abraham also, Elohim appeared to Abraham. It says he would get visions. He was a prophet. It says he's a prophet. He got visions. Elohim appeared. Yehovah, we believe it was in pre-incarnate Yeshua, appeared to Abraham. Other times it said he appeared to him and he went up from him. Other times we don't know. It just says that the word of Yehovah spoke to Abraham. However that happened, whether it was dream, vision, personal appearance, or what, or he just knew. We don't know. All of this could have gone to Abraham's head. The money, the power, the renown, the respect, the walking close with Yah. Yet it didn't. That's rare to find a leader that's wealthy, that has money, has power, and has an inside track with Elohim, and not to go to his head or her head. We see it all over the place in the Christian church and in the Catholic church and everywhere you go in religion and in politics and you name it. It's all around us today. And that's one of the reasons that the world hates Christianity. Is because of the abuse. Look at these Catholic priests that are abusing boys. They take their positions of power and trust and they abuse them. They abuse them in orphanages and they abuse them, I'm not saying they all do, I'm talking about the ones where they've been caught. They abuse them in orphanages like Boys Town and elsewhere. And it's out in the media, it's out there. And in their parishes and wherever. I'm not saying they all do, the ones that are guilty of it. There's good ones in there too. But it's a corrupt, filthy despicable system that engenders this kind of stuff in the first place. And it goes on all the time, not just in all the churches, all religion, especially, and so Abraham did not let this go to his head. That is an example to follow. I want to tell you something. I've been around the Hebrew Roots movement for quite a few years now. I've traveled, been here, and I've been pastoring this congregation now started 18 years ago, been in our home and in this building for the last 15 years. And we don't get a lot of wealthy people that come here. We don't get any high and mighty, ordinary workaday people by and large. And some of them have college educations, many of them don't. But I want to tell you, as far as I can see, this movement is not attracting the wealthy and the high and the mighty of the land, of the nation, or even of the Christian church. Because they already have their influence and their wealth, and why would they want to give that up for the truth and for what we have, when they are already well healed and they are rich and increased with goods and have need of nothing? He's not calling very many high and mighty, because most of them, they're not like Abraham. It's gone to their heads. They've got their big homes, they've got their wealth, they've got this, and bless them in that. But they don't. Why would they want to go to a little place like Canaan or the Hebrew Roots movement? Why? When they've got everything Babylon has to offer them. People like Rick Warren hanging out with the Pope. He's got his reward. Hanging out with the Grand Mufti or whatever. Yes, they got their reward. And we could list other names, but you get the point. But how much have they compromised along the way? You could name that Joel Osteen. And there's many others that have compromised the truth for mammon. And they've got their mansions. And they've got their book sales. And they got this and they got that. So Abraham is a notable character. Now, do you think Abraham didn't have his trials and his difficulties? You better believe he did. You think his marriage, because he was wealthy, and because he had power and influence, and because Yah spoke to him, that he didn't have problems in his home and in his own marriage? I want to tell you something. It doesn't take much reading between the lines to see that the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, all but destroyed his marriage. It all but destroyed his marriage. That was too far for Sarah to go. That was too far. She says, that's enough, folks. I'm done. Moses or Abraham, you've gone too far on this one. Not to take anything away from Sarah. Look, this is a lot of pressure to put on a wife. Sometimes husbands are spiritual leaders and they're out there ahead of their family. And sometimes they're out there on a branch that's going to break off. And it breaks off because they're not hearing from Yehovah. Other times they're out there and they're out there in no man's zone on faith. And sometimes women are too. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we got women out on this track too. And their husbands are not on the page with them. And they're dancing to a different tune. And the spouse goes, the wife or the husband says, you done gone too far, Mildred or Harry or whoever. I don't think we have any Mildreds or Harrys in here. So I'm not stepping on anybody's toe. And when Yehovah told Abraham, sacrifice your only begotten son, who you love. Sounds like John 3:16 there. And he took him up there. His only son by Sarah. We all know that. Anyway, it didn't say your only son, but yeah, I'm mixing, I'm conflating. But it says your son who you love. Okay, but it was his only son by Sarah, and take him up there on Mount Moriah or the mountains of Moriah. That's where the future temple eventually was put, and sacrifice him. That was too far. That was too far for him to go, for Sarah. When he came back from the Akedah, Sarah's not there, folks. She left Beersheba and she moved to Hebron, about 40 miles away, 43 miles away, I believe, to be exact. There's no mention of them living together again. She dies 43 miles away. She says, this dude's off his rocker. Now, Scripture doesn't say that, but I'm reading between the scenes, between the lines. Why else would she move away? Why? Why? Why would she leave the comfort zone of the community? Why? I don't have another answer for this. It was a bridge too far for her. She left him. Now, how long were they separate? I don't know, but it was a while. Because then we read, this is in this is the beginning of Kaisera 23. Sarah lived 100. Verse 1, Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of life of Sarah. So Sarah died in Kirjath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Meanwhile, we read up here in Genesis 22, verse 19, Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. And yet, we see she's living in Hebron. They separated after the Akedah. Then she dies there. You know, that was a strain on the marriage, folks. You know, it wasn't a bed of roses for some of these guys. Sometimes Yah asks us to do things. Our loved ones may or may not be on board with it. Usually our wives or husbands need to be on the same page, but sometimes they aren't. You bet if he's telling you to do something different than what your husband or wife agrees to, you better make sure you're really hearing from Yah before you go there, and it's not just your own flesh. Obviously, we look back with 20/20 hindsight and see that Abraham was hearing from Yah, and Sarah missed it. I mean, after all, this was her only son, and she knew she had no choice, probably no chance of having another one. I mean, maybe she could have, but it was probably unlikely at her age. So that put a real strain on their relationship. Guys, it's not easy being married. It's not easy walking with Yah, even in a marriage where you're all on the same page. There will be trials. Moses had a trial in his marriage. He married Zipporah, the daughter of Yitro, Ruel or Hobab, depending on which name he went by at the moment. And Elohim called Moses out of the wilderness of Midian and said, go set my people free. And Zipporah said, I don't think so. And she didn't go with him. She went part way, but she didn't go all the way. We don't see her mentioned again until Genesis 18, or Exodus 18, where Yitro brings Zipporah, the wife that Moses had put away. Yeah. She would not go with him. That was too far. She had a good life out there. Her father was an influential guy. He was called a priest of Midian. He had flocks. He was probably wealthy. And I'm not going into those jaws of Egypt where I'm likely to get killed and leave my little comfort zones. He put her away. And he ends up marrying a black woman. A Cushite woman, a black woman. And that's what Aaron and Miriam got all bent out of shape about. Now that's very prophetic. I'm not going to get into that. That's a picture, basically, it's a picture of Yeshua marrying a Gentile bride, if you will. But, I mean, not really, but, I mean, there's prophetic things there. I'm not going to get into that. But it wasn't easy for Moses. Moses was way beyond most people's comfort zones in all that he did. David had problems in his family. You know, when he killed all those Philistines, Saul gave him Michal, his daughter. And then when Yah called David then to become the king of Israel, and David was all, you know, Saul's clan and dynasty came to an end, and David was still married to Michal. Some people say Michael, but it would be Michal in Hebrew. And when he was all excited, when they were bringing the Ark of the Covenant back into Jerusalem after it was, anyway, they brought it back in, and David was dancing. He threw off his kingly robes, and he was just dancing, and she just like, this guy's gone too far. He's not acting like a king. And he says, oh, okay, fine. He said he basically put her on the shelf and said she was barren. In other words, he didn't have sex with her anymore. That was done. He had to put that one away because she would not go to the next level in her spiritual walk. Look, marriage is not easy. And sometimes when you're walking spiritually, it's not easy. Especially if the husband and wife aren't on the same page. We see with Paul. Paul, we don't know what Paul's status was, but he probably was married. He had to have been married. It's very unlikely that he would have been unmarried in the high levels that he traveled in that culture, in that Jewish culture. But we see no evidence of that. He's single. So by the time he comes on the scene and he's in ministry, he's single. What happened to his wife? Well, either she died or she was dead to him. He was a high-ranking Pharisee with a lot of power. He had the power and authority to the Pharisees in Jerusalem. The head Pharisees gave him authority to go and to arrest people in other cities and bring them to Jerusalem, other Jewish people. And that's how he persecuted the early church. And he probably had a lot of wealth, a lot of power, a lot of influence, because he sat at the feet of Gamliel, who was the grandson of Hillel, the greatest, quote unquote, Jewish scholar of all time, of the modern era. Likely his wife said, enough of this, you're going with this cult over here, these heretics. I'm not going to give up my lifestyle, my prestige, my wealth for you to follow after this ragtag bunch of ragamuffins. Either she died or that's what happened. And he followed Yah and remained single for the rest of his life. The point is, this walk is not an easy walk. And that's the point I want to make. Now let's go back in closing this little discussion about Abraham, about the sons of Heth. This is Genesis 23, verse 9. He paid them, even though Yah had promised that land to him. But it says, not going to be for you. It's for your heirs. The sins of the Amorites have to come to the full. And your heirs are going to go through, going into Egypt and a few things, and it's going to be several hundred years. So the point is that he paid probably an inflated price for that field with that cave to bury his wife in. But he was honorable. He was respectable. He didn't take advantage of anybody. Do we take advantage of people in our business dealings? Do we shortchange people? Do we steal from our employers? If we're employers, do we steal from our employees by not giving them their due, by not giving them extra, by not blessing them in every way possible when it's in our power to do so? I've been an employer for 30 years. I don't want anybody to ever come back to me and say I shortchanged them. I always round everything up. Everything. If there's any debate about anything, I always round it up to their advantage financially. And Yah is good. Same thing with how I treat my clients. He's given us everything, but we've got to have a good reputation in the world around us. In fact, this is one of the qualifications for an elder. If you slip over here to 1 Timothy 3, it talks about the qualifications for an elder. He's got to have a good reputation. Verse 3, verse 1. With those that are on the outside. Verse 7. Moreover, he must have a good testimony among those who are on the outside, lest he fall into reproach of the snare of the devil. If you haven't treated people properly, and you haven't followed the example of Abraham in your business dealings and how you treat your neighbors and how you act, I'll guarantee you the enemy will come and use it against you. He will use it against you. When you go out there and try to witness to them, yeah, well, what about the time you did this to me? Why should I believe you? I don't have respect for you. You don't keep your word. You're a thief. You cheated me out on this, or you didn't keep whatever. Abraham was above reproach. He was a giver, and Yah blessed him. And he was honorable. So those are a few of the things I wanted to kind of bring out as we're closing out this discussion about Abraham, as we're moving into now the life of Isaac. Amen?
Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon his name. He's near, he's near, he's near. Yeshu Hashem be'ir matzov kerahu yoto karov karov Yasov rasha darko leisha ben machshevotav yashovel ad Hashem ki arbe is Yeshu Hashem behi matzo kerahu yota karo karo Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon his name. He is near, he is near. Yeshua Hashem behi matzo